Are we ready?
Are we ready?
Yes.
If there's anyone that wants to speak to items on the agenda tonight, anyone who wants to speak to items on the agenda tonight, please fill out the form. Bring it up. Okay. Being 7:03, we will open the Town of Bartonville Planning and Zoning meeting for July the 6th. First, pledge of allegiance. Pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public participation. If you wish to address the commission, please fill out a public meeting appearance card and present it to the town administrator, preferably before the meeting begins. Pursuant to section 551-007 of the Texas Government Code, citizens wishing to address the commission for items listed as public hearings will be recognized when the public hearing is opened. For citizens wishing to speak on non-public hearing item, you may either address the commission during the public participation portion of the meeting or when the item is considered by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Approval of minutes. Discuss and approve the May 4th. Does anyone who wants to speak to other than a item on the agenda? Okay.
Jacqueline Carrington, 1361 East Judah Road. This will be just really short, but the main reason I'm here is just to thank you for your service. I really appreciate you serving on P&Z and giving up your time. A lot of times volunteering can be kind of a thankless job, and I know you spend hours looking through packets and studying ordinances and things like that. And I just wanted to say that the council and I appreciate everything you do for the town. So if there's any way we can help, please let us know. Thank you.
Discuss and approve the May 4th, 2022 regular meeting minutes.
No issues, Mr. Chairman.
Anybody
I
else?
didn't notice anything.
Okay, motion,
Motion to approve the minutes as is.
second,
Second, yeah.
Don second. All in favor? Unanimous. Public hearing. Public hearing to receive public comment and consider recommendation of the town council regarding an amendment to the Town of Bartonville Code of Ordinances, Chapter 14, Exhibit A, Article 14-02, Ordinance 361-05, the zoning regulations to change the zoning designation for an approximate 58.334 acre comprised of A003A Newton Alsip, 1 and 6, 44 acre old DCAD tract number 1H, A1518A, JR Chambers, tract 1 and 3, 6.25 acres, old DCAD tract number 1, A1643A, Keith, tract 135, 3.33 acres on old DCAD tract number 5, A003A, Newton Alsip, tract 8, 3.27, old DCAD tract A1643A, Keith, tract 5A, 0.36 acres, old DAC tract number 5B, A003A, Newton Alsip, tract 9.3 acres, A003A, Newton Alsip, tract 2A, 0.027 acres in the town of Bartonville, Denton County, Texas, from agricultural residential estate, from agriculture district to residential estates, RE2. Tracts of land are generally located on the west side of Gibbons Road, south of Frenchtown Road, east of Dyer Road. We will open the public hearing at 7:07. staff.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. We've received an application from Mr. Fuller. The original application came in for a minor plat to break the property into 4 lots. 2 of those lots would be less than 10 acres, which is not permitted in the agricultural zoning district. So thus they looked at the land use plan, and RE2 is consistent. So the request is for RE2. Again, the minor plat is that we've looked at. One of the lots is 6.6 acres, one is 8.8, and the other 2 are a little over 20 acres. So that's what necessitates the rezone to RE2. We would expect to do an administrative minor plat filing if this zoning change is granted. And I'll answer any questions you may have along with a little help.
Let's see. David Fuller.
Next,
First
excuse
of
me,
all,
Mr. Chair, the applicant would be heard next.
Oh, I'm sorry. Applicant. Applicant is next.
I'm David Fuller, 1000 South Gibbons Road. And my family has owned this farm. Just to give a little background. I believe Mom and Dad bought it in 1940, $25 an acre, as I understand. So there's 3 of us kids, myself, my brother and sister. Myself and my sister live on the farm. I've lived there for the past 39 years. I believe Linda has been there about 50 years. So we've been around a while. My grandparents each had farms in Argyle, Bartonville. So just a little background, let you know we do have roots in Bartonville. And my parents passed away, I believe Dad in 2002 and Mother in 2011. And the 3 of us getting up in years, health issues, we decided it's time to divide this thing up. And that's what we started, as Thad had said, and found we needed to rezone it. And that's what we're here for. We'd appreciate it if y'all would approve this so we can get it replatted and I can go to Colorado. Thank you.
Anybody have questions?
Any questions?
Okay. That was David. Joel and Patricia Carter. I assume it's to speak to this item. Actually, the other item is in a public hearing, so it has to be.
Well, I appreciate your family history and I don't begrudge your retirement to Colorado. I think what I would ask the council to consider is the usage of this land. I don't begrudge cutting it up. I don't begrudge inviting more people to our community. I live on 315 Dove Creek Road, and depending on whether you look at the tax rolls or the mailbox, it says Bartonville or Argyle. We've never quite figured it out. But I do know that Dove Creek Road in Frenchtown have kind of become the new Texas Motor Speedway. And as residents, we have concern about sensible usage and sensible development of the land and what would be the plan to handle this density that would be coming this way. So to me, it's not about whether it's the right thing to do, because it is, to allow this family to exit. It's about the usage of that property going forward. And I do have concerns about 2-acre minimums. So it's kind of all about what's the plan for the land. And if you can't control who buys it or what that plan is, I guess it's up to the council to figure out what that sensible growth plan looks like and what the impact on the roadways are. So I would just ask you all to think about that and consider the current situation. We do have a little bit of a speed problem on those roads around there. And I have seen Bartonville police out patrolling more frequently, which is needed. So it's all about the usage and letting these fine folks take advantage of the $25 an acre leverage that their family was wise enough to get involved in. So just ask you to consider that actual usage. Thank you.
Is it possible I could explain some things?
Sure.
I think there's some misunderstanding.
David,
Come up here, please.
I guess I led you astray. I'm not going anywhere,
Please address,
except for,
please address the P and Z, not the
Okay.
audience.
I'm not going anywhere except for a couple of months, as I do every year. We're not developing, we're not doing anything. I'm still going to live on my spot. Linda's living in her spot. Otis is, we'll have the track in between us and I'll take care of it. So nothing is going to change at all. We have no plans for developing, selling. We've had plenty of opportunities. People wanting to buy it, to develop it, and we have no interest. That's why we're doing this instead of selling it for development. I hope that clears it up.
Thank you. Jim Strange.
Jim Strange, 995, excuse me, Dyer Road, Bartonville, Texas. Distinguished council folk and chairman. I know it's kind of premature right now, but I just felt like I had to say something. I was one of the ones who spoke for the Allens. Y'all remember the Allens when they were going to subdivide and change their zoning and sell off their 20 acres over off of Jeter. They'd been there and they were 82 years old, and town council came up and denied them. I'm not for denial. I'm for supporting my brothers and my sister over there fully in regard to what they're going to do with their investment, which has become through their family. I just have concerns in regard to what could be or what might happen. One thing that we're pretty stern about, all the folks up and down the road, is there will be no construction traffic down that private road, period. We put up with this gas well that was crammed down our throat, totally destroyed the road, had to fight tooth and nail just to get it rebuilt. I mean, we weren't even asked, hey, do y'all know we're putting a gas well over here, or 3 gas wells over here? In regard to value of the property, there's one property over there. It ain't worth a dime. You can give them $25 if you want to, but we've been listening to it for the last 7 months so loud you can't hardly sleep at night. The windows just rattling with the compressor going off. It's horrible. But yet, the town says they're in control of everything, right? In regard to restrictions and building code and compliance, we've been facing another issue. A house behind us built a sport court. It's like daylight out there. It's like the Indianapolis 500. We've been inundated with light pollution like you would not believe. We used to proud our property there. I've been there for 21 years. It's almost like a dark sky area. You could get out there, you can see the planets line up, you can see Saturn and Jupiter and Mars, everything. It's beautiful, but not when them folks in the backyard back there with their non-diverted lights. And the town's been working with them for a year and a half to put diverters up. They've yet to do it. So if they can't control what they're doing now, how do they control the beautiful dark space across the street? Not begrudging my neighbors across the street. I wish them well. But if it can't be controlled, then I don't want it to happen. And in regard to the street, they will not have use of our street, period, unless they incorporate it, they improve it, and they deed it to the city as a public street. And that goes for the voice of the entire road. And that's about it. Thanks.
Leslie Cook.
Sorry, I didn't want to speak on this one later.
Otis Fuller.
Otis Fuller, Frisco Lakes. I'm the only absentee one here with it, property owner. I just wanted to mention, we're talking about this gas well. We fought having the gas well. We spoke against the gas well, so we certainly wasn't in favor of that gas well as far as the gas well goes. And I know it has been some inconvenience. I don't see a whole lot of traffic going down there. I would like to ask who owns Dyer Road? If anybody could give me an answer to that on the planning zone council or Mr. Dyer. Does anyone have any input to that?
Platted private road, 1986. We own it.
I thought that there was some, I thought that's not set in stone. I may be in error, but I thought it was turned over to the city and the city did not accept it because it didn't have a cul-de-sac at the end of it. So it's sitting in limbo, the best I can understand. Yeah. Whatever comes out, I will accept it, but I think it needs some research. Thank y'all very much.
Anyone to speak for or against? Would the applicant like to make any rebuttals to? Okay. Hearing is closed. Public hearing is closed at 7:19. Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just to change it from change this property from agricultural to RE2. And it's on the zoning map as RE2.
On the future land use map as RE2. Yes, sir. That is all you're looking at tonight.
Anybody questions?
It's the plan, so.
Anybody else? Somebody
The
want to
only
make
statement I have is the current land use plan has had this property as the future use of this land as RE2 since 2001. So this isn't anything new. It isn't any kind of a change. It is the landowner's ability and option to zone it as he's doing. So I have no problem with this.
I want, are there 4 residents on the property now? 2. Okay. Anybody want to make a motion?
I will make a motion to item number 1 to change from recommended council change from agriculture to residential estates to.
Second. Gloria, second. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Preliminary plat, Deer Hollow. Discuss and consider and make recommendation to the town council regarding preliminary plat for the proposed Deer Hollow subdivision consisting of approximately 81.397 acres, generally located east of Seals Road, west and south of Dove Creek Road, and north of Jeter Road.
Chairman, commissioners, if you'll look at your packet on the location, again, the surrounding zoning is consistent with what they are looking at here. The plat has been presented and reviewed by both the town engineer as well as our new planning consultant. We brought on Peloton to look at these types of issues to make sure that we're in compliance with state law. And they are here to speak to any questions. I think all of the comments have been addressed. Chris, would you
Yeah, we
speak to
have,
that?
we have the cul-de-sac that'll be part of discussion for tonight of whether or not the waiver is to be granted on the cul-de-sac length. And then there's a little bit of drainage that we were just discussing ahead of time on the plan. It's complete. There's just a couple errors in one of the tables that they'll be able to clean up before the council. So if needed, we could look at looking at that with the condition that does be addressed before it goes to council.
So there was, the letter was quite lengthy on the number of items that need to be
Yes.
fixed, but
Yeah.
you're comfortable that they,
Yeah, so they've gotten everything done except for pretty much this one issue. And so from discussion, I think it's a typo as opposed to a calculation error.
Zach,
Basically, town ordinance has length requirements for the cul-de-sac. There's different sizes and right-of-ways required, and there's also a maximum length of cul-de-sac. And so they are meeting the size requirement as far as the bubble at the end and the right-of-way, but they're longer than is the ordinance maximum cul-de-sac length. And so in order to get the plat approved and to get the construction plans approved, that would require a waiver.
so how many properties are on that?
Look,
How many properties are on the cul-de-sac or in the separate property?
Yeah, on the cul-de-sac.
it basically, because of the way that the site is developed there, it's two long cul-de-sacs, since there was never a throughput to the west anymore, it's just two long cul-de-sacs. And if you were to look at it from that perspective, essentially every lot is on a cul-de-sac. There's no through streets. There's one entrance in and out of the entire subdivision.
Where is the interest in and out? Is it going to open onto Stony Ridge or?
The east end is right off of Hat Creek.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So tonight, would we recommend a waiver if this body chooses to do that, as well as recommend the preliminary and final plats?
Yeah, that would be the process. What I'm hearing, I thought I heard Chris say there were two issues. One was the cul-de-sac length and one was something about drainage.
Yeah, it was so we've had a back and forth with all of the plan reviews. And in the latest submittal that you guys have on one of the tables in the proposed drainage area map, there's a couple areas that don't add up to the total they're supposed to. And so there's just a point in the plans where one of the areas calls out one area and one location calls out a different area. So they don't match. And so I would request that be a condition that we're able to work that out before it goes to council. I think the math is correct. I just think there's a typo. And so. That's completely separate.
Okay, so it's my understanding that there are actually 3 subdivision waivers that are being considered. One is the maximum cul-de-sac length. 2 is the required interim turnarounds and knuckles. And 3 is the standard tree survey requirement. The applicant is proposing a tree survey per lot instead of for the overall development. As each site comes in, the property owner or the developer at that time would be required to submit a tree permit for consideration as each lot comes in, which is not as it's written in the subdivision ordinance. So that would be a waiver. The other one would be the maximum cul-de-sac length, as he explained. And then the other one would be the required interim turnarounds and knuckles, just due to the way that the layout is for emergency access and whatnot. There's not a typical turnaround and curve on the street as typically required. So those are the 3 waivers that are being considered.
Say those again.
The first is the maximum cul-de-sac length. The second is the required interim turnarounds and knuckles. And the third is the alternate tree survey procedure.
We
And
have-
then I would add the fourth to address what Chris was talking about on the drainage calculations.
Now, that would be a condition.
That's a condition.
Not a waiver. Correct?
Correct.
Is what I'm, okay. So you would approve, you would recommend approval with the condition that that comment be addressed. And then the 3 waivers would actually be up for consideration by city council.
Okay, let's,
Please go into the drainage or the knuckle issue that they're wanting a waiver on as opposed to what we normally would want.
So what I had kind of looked at it as, if they're going to get the waiver on the cul-de-sac length, it would include the knuckle, and I think that's probably a wrong interpretation. Because of the length of these, generally when you've got a long cul-de-sac like that, you've got some hooks in it. And on each one of those hooks, you'll have a knuckle, an area for a vehicle to turn around. If you're looking at the plat where the road to the south comes in and makes that sharp 90 is where you typically have a knuckle. And, excuse me. And so there's also, because of the length of these culverts, there's that issue as well.
I spoke with the ESD1 and they're not excited about the length of the cul-de-sacs, but they said if, they could get over that issue if the homes were to be sprinkled. And I talked to the developer and he said that is not a problem. To make sure that, again, there's no issue with the emergency services.
No.
The homes are what? The request was that
Sprinkled.
that all homes out there be sprinkled.
Inside.
so
Okay.
they're okay with the
I
the
spoke-
cul-de-sac length and not having the. knuckle?
They can be okay with the cul-de-sac length. Again, that wasn't preferred. It was when that emergency access road was removed.
Okay, I guess we need to hear from the applicant. Why do we need that? Why do we need to make those waivers for you?
Good afternoon. My name is Darren Andrews with McAdams, and I'm representing Mike Mullo, who's the property owner and is developing it for Deer Hollow. I can speak to the cul-de-sac links. They are 5-acre lots, so it's really difficult to meet that standard when you have a 5-acre lot, just because of the nature of the size of a 5-acre lot. And that's just, that's the way it laid out, so we can meet the minimum 5 acres. We range from 5 to 7 acres on these lots. And as we said, we have one cul-de-sac that's only got really 4 lots on that cul-de-sac. The other cul-de-sac has a total of, has 8 lots. So that is how the cul-de-sac length is where it is. So we can't really have an intermediate cul-de-sac in the center of the lots, 5 acres.
I need you to address what my initial question was, and that was the cul-de-sac turnaround is what I'm understanding you're needing a waiver on in addition to the length. So are you telling me that the actual, or us, that the turnaround at the end of these cul-de-sacs does not conform with our standard?
Yeah, that conforms to your standard. The
It
cul-de-sac,
does?
the actual cul-de-sac sizes are per code. They
Now,
meet the actual sizes.
Meaning the
The radius,
turnaround
yes,
is what
yes.
you're referring to?
Yes, the actual size, the right of way, it's 120 foot, I believe. It's 120 foot radius is what in the ordinance, and we do meet that.
So the only issue with the fire department is the actual length of the road, not the turnaround.
Yes, ma'am, that
part.
is correct. The
Okay.
ESD's issue was the length, not the turnaround.
So what is the knuckle then?
You're
Looking
getting,
up, I'm double checking what the ordinance exact language is so I can quote it. And just because I think what it is it's 2 separate sections within the ordinance. And so I think, and that would be, if they're 2 separate ordinance, that probably does require 2 independent waivers. That's a good statement.
Are you speaking of an additional wide spot in the road as being required because of the length of the cul-de-sac?
Essentially, yes,
Okay.
yes.
This is what, 200 feet too long?
I think it's 5.
Oh, it's
That's what I'm
5.
checking on. Yeah.
Okay.
It might even be 1,000 between the knuckles, but I just want to check before I.
Between the knuckles. Okay, okay.
So it says, full knuckles shall be constructed a maximum interval of 500 feet with a minimum outside right-of-way diameter of 100 feet and a minimum outside paving diameter of 80 feet. So every 500 feet.
And so the length is 1,000, so it would require one in the middle, therefore not to do it on that particular section, you'd have to have a waiver. Then on the second cul-de-sac street, does that also require, would that also require a knuckle or a waiver?
Yes.
How long is that other one? If one's 1,000 feet, are they both the same length?
Shorter. It's about
Yeah,
700.
one's about 1275 coming off the intersection, and the other's 7,
Doing quick math.
about 1,500. And that's, both those numbers are pulled from where they intersect together, where it comes off as a T.
Can you tell me how long the one entrance in and out is into Badminton Estates?
Second, but I will.
From the T
From
It's- it's-
or the whole thing?
Frenchtown Road to the end?
Yeah. About 3,000 feet. That's all the way to that southern point.
Just say 3,000?
Correct. To where it actually dead ends.
Would that did not require those things, hip things we're talking about, because there are roads going, a couple of streets that go off that, or should those two have had those and we waivered them?
It should have required that and received a waiver. The streets coming off of it, Blenheim, that whole essentially subdivision is one long cul-de-sac. So it'd have the same requirements as these are. Now, the actual knuckle piece, let me see where that first side road is coming off. Yeah, so the actual knuckle piece of that was either a waiver before or was not considered before, because the first road to the south Blenheim is about 1,000 feet south of Frenchtown. And that would be the first opportunity to turn around.
And are the streets in this subdivision the same width and as the ones in Badminton Estates?
It should be, yes.
And also, is the entrance, we required Badminton to put an entrance, a specific entrance width in there, because there was only one way in and out. And I'd like to know if this entrance into this Deer Hollow is the same width as that, or is it smaller?
So I'd have to check. I'm gonna guess it's smaller because it's divided. Badminton is actually divided with a median in the middle and two separate roadways. I don't know how big
Which
the
was
median is.
intentional
Yeah,
to get people out of there if need be.
yeah. And there is, just to correct myself, there is a knuckle on Badminton. It's about 800 feet south of Frenchtown. So it's not a full 1,000 to Blenheim. And so that actual width. Yeah, it's 23 feet of pavement with, oops. With about an 8-foot median.
23 feet of pavement on each side.
Yes, yes.
I will say this one is proposed. I know it widens a little bit, but it's a continuation of Hat Creek as opposed to coming off of another roadway. So I'm not sure if it's any wider.
Yeah. So it basically throats out to probably provide like a welcome to the subdivision sign. But it doesn't really accomplish the same thing that this does, where if there's an accident on, excuse me, if there's an entrance on the way in, ingress or egress, you'd still be able to come in on the other side. This doesn't achieve that same effect. Because you're basically just going through an hourglass. Since it's coming right out of Hat Creek, you're essentially have an even longer cul-de-sac. Because you really would go to the first point in Hat Creek where there's an intersection
But,
from that perspective.
so what would it take to make the entrance into this Deer Hollow accomplish the same thing that we required at the entrance of Badminton?
I wouldn't say that's feasible because you're not coming off a T intersection where you have 3 different ways to go. You've got one way to go. There's only one way in and one way out.
But
The closest thing would be Stony Ridge Drive. But it's not apples to apples. It's a similar right-of-way width, but it's not a similar access condition. Because Hat Creek's going through an existing neighborhood and that one is going to an existing collector arterial roadway. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
There have been changes since we saw it at DRC where you were talking about a knockbox being added at the end of, and that's been removed because there's already an existing road with a knockbox that services Hat Creek if they get into trouble.
Correct.
So would you tell everybody about this change?
Well, the change to the access road that we were planning that continues west on the west side of the property and went north due to basically public ejection and the amount of protected trees that we're going to have to come out for that road. That's when it was recommended to us to remove that access road. Because people were concerned about all the trees that were going to have to come off along the back of their property. And basically that whole road, I mean, you've seen the site, this whole site is full of protected trees. So there would be, I don't know, probably 100 to 140 trees that would have to come out along that path. Now, the entrance that we have into our site is a continuation of the Hat Creek plat. There is a Hat Creek ends in a cul-de-sac, and there's one residence off of that cul-de-sac, and they continue the right of way, which is a 60-foot right of way to our property line, and that is where we're tying up. So we don't have the right of way right there to make it wider.
Did you get any input from the fire department about issues of getting in and out of there? You know, were there concerns about that?
They did not express any concerns to my office when I talked to them. Again, they just talked about the length and they understood the loss of that secondary access. And that's why they suggested maybe the developer would be willing to sprinkle all houses, even those that were under 5,000 feet, which is per our ordinance.
At our entrance, I will say at our entrance, we have the cul-de-sac and there's a stretch of about 30 foot of 24-foot wide paving. And at the entrance, we do have a median. And instead of 2 12-foot lanes, we actually have an 8-foot median at our entrance on our property. And we have 2 22-foot lanes.
Hat Creek?
No, coming off of Hat Creek into our property.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes, sir. So we
in-
do have a median and there's two 22-foot lanes for probably about 30 to 40 feet. Because in that median, there's going to be the mailboxes. And so we are providing for, so if someone stops to get their mail, people can still pass around. They're not backing up traffic or anything like that.
Let's have something on the cul-de-sac.
If we are going to require the structures to be sprinklered, the only way, I mean, there's probably a few ways we could do it, but maybe conditioning the approval of the plat with a written agreement that it would be enforced at the time of building permit.
Do that, yeah, okay. Does anybody have a problem with the extend the cul-de-sac?
Mr. Chair, I wonder if it'd be appropriate to get something in writing from the fire department on this issue.
Yeah, that we can.
Got it very late. We do have something in writing that was presented to my office late this afternoon, and that we can certainly provide that.
Or the drainage is gonna be a condition. The tree survey, why can't we do the tree survey like we normally do?
The short answer is you can. I can let the applicant speak to the reason he's requesting the waiver.
Is there a problem with letting them do that way?
You know, some cities require a protected amount of tree cover for the whole development. Bartonville does not have that. You have a list of protected trees, and the applicant of the tree removal permit would have to mitigate any protected trees that they remove. But since there's no overall development percentage that you have to monitor, it really doesn't adversely affect the enforcement of the tree preservation standards you have to do it lot by lot.
Why can't we go ahead and do it like?
Well, so the reason is because they're 5-acre lots. Mike has already paid for a tree survey for all the right of way and for the easements, and we have surveyed already hundreds of trees. The reason that we set it up this way is because people are coming and they're going to be required, because we did set it up just like Hat Creek. This is exactly like the Hat Creek plat. We have the exact same note. The plat for Hat Creek specifically states that each individual lot owner is responsible for their own tree survey. So we did exactly like Hat Creek. And the thinking is, you know, people are coming here because of the trees, and they're not wanting to, really the only trees that they're going to want to probably remove are the trees that are going to be where their house is, which they're really not required to mitigate anyway. So that's why we set it up this way, just like Hat Creek. So when they come in, they can situate their house, they can remove just the required trees and leave the rest of them, you know, as it is. Because that's the whole appeal of this whole neighborhood, is the sheer amount of trees and mature trees, big trees that they have.
Nobody has a problem with that?
We can manage that.
I don't see any problems
Okay.
enforcing the standards that you have with the alternate procedure.
So that would be the other waiver that we need.
So by doing this, it makes no actual difference. Because even if it's on the homeowner's property, if they take out 22 huge, big trees that are protected, they have to mitigate that according to our ordinance, even if we do it that way, as opposed to doing the same property, the whole property, correct?
Anyone who cuts down a tree in Bartonville still has to do a tree removal permit, which would be reviewed at that time for compliance with the ordinance. Any trees that they were required to mitigate would be assessed at that time. And you're correct. It wouldn't make any difference if you did it now or did it later in terms of the standards you have.
Ordinance does not require mitigation where the house sits, where the
That's correct.
driveway is. So again, if they're only taking out those trees, we would review it in my office and I would work with the consultants to make sure that we are meeting our ordinances. But again, we can handle that process in-house where they are still mitigating everything that's required.
And the reason they've already surveyed the right of way and that type of thing is prior to the grading permit being issued, we would really want to ensure that they were only grading where they were allowed to take out the trees for the roadways. So they've already done that step.
So we need a waiver for the cul-de-sac knuckle conditioned on having sprinklers put in. And a waiver for the tree to have that done later. And a condition that the drainage, and did you have something else besides drainage that?
It was the knuckle, both the cul-de-sac length and the length to the knuckle, which I think both become a condition of fire approving it. Or the sprinklered homes.
I can speak on the condition on the drainage. I was reviewing it. I know what the issue is. It's just an Excel spreadsheet.
Just a condition that we straighten that out before.
Yes, and I can do that tomorrow. I
When they
mean,
go
that's-
to council, the plans will be corrected.
Okay.
That'll be corrected by the end of the week. So
Yeah.
that's not-
Anybody else have any more?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I have a question. And so you heard what the proposed condition was about the sprinkling and to have a written development agreement be entered into, which will be applied at the time of building permit. Is that agreeable to you?
That the sprinkler system is written into the development agreement. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I do have a question if I can ask.
Mike, can you come up?
Yeah, sure.
Please.
Mike Mallow, I'm at 916 Dove Creek in Bartonville. Excuse me, my voice is shot. To answer your question, I don't mind doing the sprinklers because I think it goes with the product that I'm delivering. It just, certain things go in certain products. My question is, if one of my clients, lot number 6, is doing a 4,400 foot house and does not want the sprinklers, would I be required at that point, or would that be something that we could discuss? And I don't know that it would be an issue. I'm just trying to, there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens out there. Typically, if you're going to pay this money for a lot, there's certain things in my mind that need to go with this product. But I just want to ask in case I run into that objection.
I think that's something appropriate for you to talk about with the commission because
That's why we're letting you have the variances for the knuckles.
Okay.
It would have to have a sprinkler. That's what the fire department said.
Okay.
So it would be required, period.
'Cause y'all know that-
Put a 2,000 square foot house in.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. You know that I'm caught in a little bit of a catch-22 here because I'm meeting your 5-acre requirements, which are massive lots. You only have so much roadway that can get you to those lots, right? So I'm kind of in this little gray area. I feel like, I thought we made a really reasonable DRC submittal once we try to space out this property, if you will. So, I appreciate y'all working with us, and it's just one of those things. We got these, to walk that property, these lots are massive and they're gorgeous. And me as the developer and the builder, I don't want to take out any more trees than I have to. That's where the value is, amongst other things, but that's a huge, huge asset there. So I guess we're okay with everything then. And I could sign something to protect the houses with fire suppression.
We have to follow what the fire department recommends.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Thank y'all. Yes, sir.
If you put in the knuckles, does that take away the value of the land?
Yes, that's just gonna, we've spent so many hours and time trying to strategically lay out this land to give us the best yield that we could. Excuse me. And that makes the best sense from a design perspective. And the knuckles would really take away the feel. And it's just it's so different because you're having to get into there from Hat Creek. So it's just, we only have 14 lots on the ground. That's it. That's all we can ever have. And, I think with us not doing that secondary access, I think that the minds to be here were the common sense approach is what we're doing. I think that everybody would still be very safe and the fire trucks or emergency vehicles can get in there and do what they had to do, just the way that this is laid out. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Somebody want to make a motion?
I move that we recommend the preliminary plat to town council with the following recommendations: that buildings are required through the building permit to be sprinkled, and this must be in writing. We grant the following waivers: a waiver for the knuckles as not a requirement, as well as the length. A waiver for the drainage to be fixed, not a waiver, but it must be fixed, conditional by the time it gets to council. And that we grant a waiver for the tree survey to be done as they're requesting, as opposed to what our normal requirement. The requirements are the same, but the survey and the way they do it are different. And yes.
That's for clarification on the sprinkling system. Is that every lot in this development or just the ones on the long, particularly long cul-de-sac? Or all? That's true. Okay.
I have two clarifications of the motion. One, are you recommending that only primary structures be sprinkled so you don't have to sprinkle sheds as well? Yes.
The recommendation was primary residence.
Okay,
Correct.
primary residence. And then the second clarification is the two conditions of approval would be the drainage correction and the sprinkler at time of building permit. The other three would be waivers to the
Correct.
subdivision ordinance.
So waivers on trees, waivers on knuckle, waivers on length, and then correction of the drainage and written onto the plat, the requirement of sprinkler for all residences,
Primary residence.
primary residences.
Yeah, anything? No. Okay. Second?
Second.
Before we vote on this, I'd like to make a comment,
Sure.
if that's appropriate, and that is, especially people out here may be wondering, this town is loaded with roads that are longer than what the ordinance now meets. I personally think we need to go back and look at those ordinances when we're hitting a point where we're constantly having to grant waivers on something that more than likely doesn't belong in there in the first place. We have streets that are far longer than this that have been in this town for years and years and years. So that is why I specifically think we need to grant a waiver on this.
Second. Are we second? All in favor? Next, the next item is the final plat on Deer Hollow. The same motion.
Ditto.
But you practiced that so well.
I don't see a reason to change it for the final plat. So
We need to repeat it for the final plat.
You can repeat it by saying it's the same motion as for the previous item. And then
same
someone
motion
needs-
as the previous item.
And I have a second on that. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Next item is workshop item, fence ordinance updates. Discuss and consider and make recommendations to the town council to call for public hearings regarding the ordinance amending Division 4 Special Requirements, Chapter 20 fencing, walls and screening requirements, and any other related sections of the zoning ordinance for the town of Bartonville related to fencing, walls, and screening. So
Chairman and Commissioners, this is something y'all have discussed in the past. And we've brought some items forward to help you. And that's also part of the reason we brought Peloton on, is to bring some of that additional information from other communities that perhaps y'all might want to know on the screening and fencing issues. And again, the discussions are how do we protect those major roadways without giant walls and barriers up that create a look that's not very Bartonville. And so this is just for discussion. And I thought my information was that perhaps it was kicked back from council to further discuss the live screening. Again, because if someone plants a hedge of a certain height, and I think it was 2 feet, anything above that, it still has to meet that transparency requirement. So again, this is discussion. Y'all don't have to take any action. It's just what do we take back to council?
So what other changes would you recommend that we had very lengthy discussions back and forth on this, trying to come up with what was the best way to do it. And what we passed on to council was just sort of, this is what we could come up with.
Discussions with Ed, we were talking about, that it's difficult when you have, single lot residential homes who want to build a fence, and how do you address that? And again, if the desire is to address it in the zoning ordinance, which is what has been discussed previously, the only way to do that is through variance. We had talked about maybe an administrative way to do that for individuals, but there really isn't one. If you're going to change the zoning ordinance, it is we either allow it or it has to be a variance that goes before the BOA. Is that correct? Did I summarize that correctly, Ed?
Yeah.
So
And my understanding when it went to council was that there was a particular concern about individuals' lots as opposed to subdivisions, number one, and number two, that live plants were considered fencing too. And I don't think, at least in my mind, I don't know about the rest of you, I don't consider planting a hedge someplace the same as putting up a big old wall, which is what we were trying to get away from. So I don't know that, in my mind, I would consider somebody putting up a hedge being the same thing, or even being considered where you'd have to have 60 or 50/50 or whatever it is we set up on that. I wasn't under the impression that that would count as a fence. I don't know about the rest of you.
The phrase used is fences and walls. So you want to clarify and be sure you're not including any living material.
I think that would have
Do that.
caused a lot less heartburn at the town council meeting.
So I thought that I'd chip in here because I think part of this conversation is the result of the trifecta development, where the bottom half is a retaining wall and it looks like a fence. I mean, it looks like someone's got a screening wall on the bottom half of that property, but it's really a retaining wall. And that it is not governed in the ordinance on how to control that. So if that's something that is desired to avoid in the future, that would be something that you'd want to change the ordinance on.
But as a technical point of clarification, if you did prohibit stone or solid retaining walls, that would have some drastic implications on the developability of some of the properties within the city or within the town.
Absolutely.
Give it that.
Again, that wasn't the intent at all with what we were asked to do. We were looking strictly at, so we didn't end up with something that looks like Lantana with walls all over the place. Incoming, especially things that had more than one side on the road. That would be a huge issue with walls all over. So tell us what we need to do here.
Again, this is y'all's call, but it does sound like, again, there's walls and fences, and then if the desire is to exclude living screening, then that can be written in there, can it not, Ed?
Sure.
So
What do you
again,
think about that? Do you consider living screening a wall?
No, I don't know. To me,
Yeah, but
My question is,
if they put hedges along the curve up at 407 for that subdivision and put, I don't know, I can't think of the hedge I had against my barn that gets huge. We wouldn't like that. If we put a hedge up that's 6 foot tall, even though if we don't consider that a wall, they could put a hedge up and that wouldn't be an open Bartonville feel to it at all.
I don't think that would, to me, that would not create the same effect as I see where they put up a concrete wall that's
No,
8 foot
but-
tall that feels like you're in a tunnel. I know what you're saying,
But
but I think a
Technically,
living,
if you put up
yeah,
a hedge around there, that would be, the same
allow
effect.
trees. Because you can put a lot of different types of trees that
yeah,
can
but
be
you
very.
can see through the trees.
Some you can't. If you put an evergreen, you can do some of those that are pretty.
So I think our intent is to make it stay as country as possible so
Right.
that you're not looking at driving down Lantana or driving on 407 and Lantana's on this side with huge brick walls and Bartonville is this open space. And we want to keep the open space and not have the walls. So a hedge could do the same thing.
Playing devil's advocate here on that property. There has to be some way for those people to go in who buy expensive homes and don't want everybody on 407 looking at them out in their backyards in a swimming suit.
What do you want?
So there has to be a way to soften, but still give them some privacy, which still puts me, I mean, maybe not one of those privet kind of hedge things that they have in England that you couldn't go through if you tried. I don't know,
So,
but there has to be some way to mitigate it without
yeah, I don't
fixing
disagree.
it till somebody can't have some privacy in their own
I'm
backyard.
just throwing out that the hedge could serve the same purpose. I don't disagree with you on that at all.
Okay, that's why we have
So
people
where do
over
we
here to
go?
figure this out.
How do we do that?
So, question for your question. There are two different goals that you might have. They kind of mix, but they would result in different standards. One is to protect call it rural country feel. The other one is to protect open view corridors. And you can get a rural country feel with the right combination of materials and landscaping, including living screen and all that stuff. You can even get it with masonry walls that provide the noise barriers and everything. If you provide enough open space between the curb and the masonry wall with some really nice landscaping, you can even do a white picket fence that curves through it and protect that rural country feel. However, if your goal is to protect open views, you have to understand that right now you can allow a chain link fence. because it's 50% transparent. So does a chain link fence get
I
you,
don't think so.
you know what I'm saying? So there's two different.
I think we're looking for what your first
The
description.
rural country feel?
Yeah.
Okay,
But I don't like your wall behind there.
yeah, yeah. So the rural country feel though, you know, should include living screens of any type. So, you know, I've got some family in Washington State and they use evergreen, for lack of a better term, Christmas trees, as fence lines a lot because you don't walk through them and the dogs won't go through them and they provide that living screen. But it does provide that rural country feel because it's green. So in terms of a living hedge, red tip photinias or something like that, yeah, they might be not your favorite plants or something, but would you rather see someone's gnome collection, and some, wind turbine things and all sorts of junk in their backyard, or would you rather it be screened? So again, there's two different objectives there. If you're trying to do rural country feel, I think living screen's fine.
I would prefer that we have fewer rules and regulations as we possibly can.
And it's also kind of hard to enforce. Some homeowners might not realize how tall a red tip photinia gets.
That's what that was the plant that I was thinking
Yeah,
of.
yeah.
It was
Yeah.
humongous.
Well, they get disease and die whether you like
I
it or
know, it
not.
took me forever to dig them all out.
Then you've got your 50% view because
Yeah,
about
there you
half of them go.
Yeah. But, in terms of materials for open view sheds, the thing that popped out to me when this first came to me was, well, I know they don't want chain link. So, if you do select a standard like that, then we should really talk about the definition of a fence and allowed materials along the major corridors.
Something so that we can work on it at the,
Yeah, I think in addition to what was
future.
in your packet, possibly a definition of fence would go a long way, fence or wall. And just clarify that it doesn't include plants for these purposes, and.
I think you have the idea of what we're
Mhm.
trying to do.
Yeah, yeah, and if it's rural country feel, then, that should include plants, but also, something else jumped out at me about the ordinance and, I'm kind of new to the conversation, but it says that, fences less than 6 feet tall don't require a permit. That's different. That's really different because what happens is, not only can people put them on other people's property, they can also put them over easements. And it can cause a lot of issues that show up later at City Hall for Thad and crew. So I think that was just something that was different. If we're going to make amendments to the fence ordinance, we should probably roll in, a fence permit requirement.
Doesn't even have to be a charge, but it's something.
No.
We just happened on my third day, I was riding around with Corey and we saw someone building across Broom Road. They were putting about to put a pipe fence across that easement. And so that is why this issue came out. If there was a permit, even if there was no charge, we would at least get to review it and say, no, you can't build across this public easement here.
Yeah, and then there's
so-
typically an inspection after the permit's complete, after the construction's complete. And if anything's done that's not appropriate, then it protects the homeowner as well.
Make sure we don't do so much that people like myself that have these properties, I don't want to have to redo my fence.
No, it wouldn't apply to
Grandfather.
existing fences.
You don't have to redo.
Just any new fences would require a permit.
We're looking for that balance. Again, we're looking to address some of these issues without putting undue regulations on anybody.
Well, we're trying- Not having permits was the idea of not having more regulations, but I see your point that we need to make sure that they're putting the fence where they're supposed to and not.
Yeah, we had to argue with the guys that had already put that post on the other side of the right of way. where it did, there's that easement to the back of the equestrian center.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so again, that
They
was,
should not be putting a pipe fence across there.
no, and they had no
They shouldn't have
idea.
blocked
They-
it with anything.
Right. And it's not, but they were about to.
And your comment about putting things, fence lines wrong. We had that happen to us between our property and the next property, and until the house went up on market next door, we didn't know they were over on our property. And it came out then and everything had to be adjusted, but it is worth making sure that, of course, the onus should be on the homeowner. It should never have been put there in the first place. But
So does that make sense that,
Yeah, so
Put something
it
together
just
and
kind of
we'll-
popped out at me and I thought I would mention
I mean,
it,
I don't
but-
think it's, we don't have a problem putting this off, do we? No. Okay. Let's,
And just to clarify too, it's only the major roadways that this is a concern for, not the kind of minor residential.
yeah, that's
Okay.
why we,
well, I have a
Got a
question
list.
about that.
Yes.
It really doesn't have anything to do with where it is, it's what it is. If it's, when we're talking, I mean, this was written for not specific places in town, it was written for subdivisions. So it could be on a little tiny street subdivision, if there's a 20-acre property in there that gets divided. I don't see the point of picking out streets as opposed to looking at what is the reason to have it. And that is so that even if it's smack dab in the middle of town, if you're gonna make a subdivision, then you have to consider the idea of nobody putting a big old wall in around it.
So to clarify that, then, technically speaking, splitting one lot into two lots is a subdivision. So if you have that situation, homeowner wants to put up a wood fence, standard wood Texas privacy fence along 407, is that something that we would allow or that we would want to allow?
I don't know how you can call that a subdivision. You're dividing the land, yes, but the definition of a subdivision certainly isn't what you just
We
gave us
can
the
write it-
scenario for.
We can write it into the ordinance and say a subdivision of 4 lots or more, or something like that. But in terms of how the subdivision ordinance defines that word, it's, splitting one lot into 2 or more.
To your
I
point, we can
understand that.
absolutely write
Yeah.
it so that it's
Well,
not catching the
yeah, but
wrong.
we can-
Exactly, because what we just did was allow someone to subdivide their land amongst 4 family members. Therefore, that falls into the minor plat. Therefore, I certainly wouldn't consider that creating a subdivision, and it doesn't trigger any of the subdivision things either.
Let's look at that. I mean, that's something we can explore on the best way to break that up before we bring it back with y'all's comments in there.
As a sidebar, I think we need to, while we're thinking about screening, we need to think about solar panels. We're having a lot of interest in solar panel installations in the Saddlebrook area. And I'm wondering what might happen if someone said, I'd like to put a bank of solar panels on the ground with this angle. And there's no HOA there. So what are the ordinances for something like that?
That's not in the use table. We actually had that request.
I think we
It's not,
better.
it's not used, so it's not allowed.
It's not allowed.
It's not allowed?
Correct. If it's not listed in the use list, then it's not allowed in town.
There's probably 2 different variations of that. One would be solar panels on your roof. The use is single-family residential. The other would be a commercial enterprise that has solar panels, which would be a new and unlisted use, like a solar farm.
We actually have a residential, this is some big houses. The residential use that was actually asking to put in basically a solar array, if you will, And again, I talked to Ed and it's not in the use table and it is not permitted. On the house, we can't regulate, but once it gets off the house, it's a different use.
Our attorneys, or not our attorneys, our CMA, Homer COA, said that the state was taking a much more liberal view of solar panels in light of the energy situation and so on. So
Well, it's not on the agenda, so why don't we address
Yeah.
it in
Want
a
to
different
put it on,
agenda?
I'll put it on next time.
look into it and
Yes.
put it on our agenda for another meeting.
Well, we can be prepared more.
Yes.
Okay. And we're not just
We're not-
discuss items that
We're
are.
not discussing.
Attorney
It's not on
Dan,
the
I'm not
agenda.
going to speak until.
well, I saw screening. That's what.
Yeah, It's not a screen issue. It's a different issue. We need to,
We can't use a solar
Not-
panel as a screen, no.
no.
Okay. Any,
It's because you can't see through it.
what are our future
Yes.
agenda items?
Got it.
Anybody have anything else? Then we're adjourned at 8:18. Thank you.